Well, every now and then you get a chance to chop it up with somebody that's hanging out in their camper van. Melanie Gabbi, how are you?
I'm great. Great to meet you as well, Chris.
That's
And
awesome.
even
So
that
you
you
were talking to me about mental health. We were talking about entrepreneurs. We were talking about how it requires just a little bit of craziness to be an entrepreneur. Let's keep that dialogue going. Let's keep talking around about that.
well, yeah, in order to there's sort of two key strands in life, isn't there? That we take the traditional route of grow up, go to school, get a set of exams, go to university, have 2.5 children, that kind of branch.
Yeah.
Do that and go down that. But um I've definitely worked with hundreds, probably worked with thousands of people one to one and in groups. And I've found patterns over the years of the amount of young people that I worked with teenagers, I worked with parents, I worked with adults who either chose a course because they didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know really what was at the heart of what they enjoyed, unless they went down a route of doing sport, really knew that they loved painting, whatever it was. But a proportion of people, high proportion, went through the whole system, didn't really know what they wanted to do. And sometimes it takes something that happens on the external to nudge you really hard and to wake up and say what you've been doing for the last few years, for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, is making your soul cry, that you're getting depressed, you're getting anxious, you're looking for meaning and purpose. Then you get another group of people, and I'm probably one of those, but I didn't know it for a long time, that was already disillusioned in the education system, that knew what I found was important to me, couldn't access that information because it wasn't really available when I was growing up. And you have to be curious, you have to want to turn over stones, and also live with so many different diverse types of people or groups so that you can just keep
Growing.
absorbing these different backgrounds.
Yeah, different perspective. And you said something that hits a nerve for me. I think the educational system as it is today doesn't create independent thinkers. It creates people that have memorized information and that are basically regurgitating that memory of information. We are losing independent thinkers. We are losing the creativity that should be brought out of people so that they can become thinkers. We need to grow thinkers, not memorization people or soldiers that basically march to an order.
Well, I think it's been like that since the conception, to be honest. I actually, when I don't understand something, I'll go and do a really deep dive into that topic and find out where the roots of it all started. And I looked at the sort of early 1900s industrial revolution in the UK and then how the schooling system was set up. And really,
Where are
most
you at
people,
now?
where am I at now?
Yeah. What
What
part
do you
of the
mean?
world?
Oh, so I'm in the UK. So
No,
I'm
no.
near,
What part of the UK though?
so I live near London, but I grew up in Manchester and I grew up on a working class housing estate where education wasn't valued that greatly, where you left school at 14, 15, 16, and you went into whatever job your parents did, whether you worked in a bread factory or a shop or became a typist or something. And so sometimes there were people, and I've seen this because when I finished my training as a psychotherapist, it was 1999 and there weren't really many jobs around. And I ended up by some weird fluke working in schools, in primary schools, that's in the UK, 5 to 11 years old, and then the secondary schools. And so I saw a lot of what I was experiencing when I was at school. And over time, and I did schools for about 5 years. So I worked with a lot of young people. And I saw, just as we were saying, those kids that were on this route to this trajectory, doing exams, going to university and going in a particular route. But I also saw a high proportion of kids, and actually a lot of them were boys at the time, that were what we would say kinesthetic learners, looking at learning styles. And the area that I worked in was really innovative. And we looked at the learning styles and we realized that a proportion of the kids that were struggling in school just weren't either getting the right type of teaching, or they were the kind of kids that should be out there doing, making things, learning engineering. Also, I don't want to sort of put it into little boxes. And they were often the ones that were really struggling. And when we look at education itself, of how it was set up, it was for really just making people able to count enough bags of potatoes or whatever, take it to market, and and know what you're doing. We weren't educated to be thinkers, not the working classes and the serfs. We weren't educated. That was discouraged. That was discouraged when my son went to school. So a lot of his arguments and stands up with teachers was because he was a free thinker. We're a philosophically minded family, and we don't take anything as a as a given. We uncover some of that information that is blindly sort of shared. So you're dead right. Yeah, kids go to school, they have a particular set of exams they're meant to do and qualify with. But the one thing that really disheartened me when I was working in schools, and I did struggle working in schools, was that the kids' identity was massively impacted if they started to struggle. And often those struggles actually started very early. If they weren't meeting the certain standards for either because of their learning style, maybe they have different needs, maybe they had dyslexia and it wasn't covered, maybe they were very sporting or musical people, but that wasn't promoted or channeled and fostered. And by the time they get to about 14, a lot of them had given up. And we're really starting to have this internal dialogue that they were stupid. There was something wrong with them and they couldn't do it. And so some of the proportion of those kids then carve out a path, find something through fluke, circumstances or something, or have multiple jobs and then start to find a path. And much more now, we've got entrepreneurs, a lot more entrepreneurs now than we did a decade ago.
You
You
think
know,
so? We're in the UK or in America? I think it's the opposite in America.
okay.
I think I think when I was growing up, me and my friends would do a lemonade stand, or we would take glass bottles from the soda pop companies to back to the store and get our nickel. And we were hustlers. And I
Yeah.
see less hustle in
Yeah.
America today than I did back 20, 30 years ago. And I think that that's a shame. I think we should teach children how to be hustlers, how to be entrepreneurs. I think that should be more of our curriculum. And the sad fact is, we're basically teaching kids these days to fall in line, to study hard, to get the degree, then go into corporate America and work till you pay off all your college loans. That is a horrible model. That is a terrible model.
It's a disastrous model, but we could go really down the rabbit hole on that one as to why that was designed in that way. And the thing is that that message is reinforced consistently. So the amount of teachers that I heard in the secondary school when they got to year 10, which was 14-year-olds, where they'd start practicing for their exams. You must pass your exams. You'll never get to uni. If you don't get to uni, you won't be able to find a job. And this conditioning was huge and rife. And it was a struggle to really support kids in school because a lot of the problems, and I've said this, I've actually worked quite high up in different fact systems in the UK. And I've said this to many of my colleagues. A lot of the mental health difficulties we came into contact with, I believe, were actually created by this school system that had the kids either their true nature and gifts being channeled. And you have to have order and chaos. You have to have sort of both elements. You can't just be a freewheeling hippie, and I'm part hippie, so nobody gets offended. Um,
Therefore, explaining the van.
yeah. And that's the thing is part of as we get older and often only when we get to our 40s and 50s, we might actually start to reconnect with the things that actually we always love doing, but maybe feared wanting to create or set up for all sorts of reasons that we might have loved. So I always like traveling, but now I'm just changing different modes of transports to meet that same need. And the more we oppress the creative nature of a human being, either it causes mental distress, as Freud wrote about very early on. The human system can't cope with oppressing so much of its natural innate ways of being, so it has to find an outlet. And sometimes those outlets are rebelliousness of kids, ending up in certain circumstances or being disillusioned during a job. I was actually reading a piece of research about 6 months ago about the midlife crises that 30-year-olds are going through. So the system itself, yes, is massively a big factor in how we do, because you can't separate nature and nurture. You can't separate individual from environment. You've got to make several changes to all of those different systems for somebody to actually be able to emerge through that. And it's a variety of factors.
I agree. I agree. So, talk a little bit about your personal journey. What are you doing today, and what are you going to be doing over the next 12 to 18 months?
So it's sort of constantly evolving. Basically, like I said, I qualified as a therapist in 99. I was only working one-to-one with people at the time. And then I just discovered I was good at designing programs. So I designed programs for schools all around well-being, emotional literacy, helping kids thrive, all of that. Did the same with families and parents, and then managed and run systems. So I worked in the NHS England and eventually oversaw lots of mental health programs that were going across the country. But I've always had these two paths. I've always had my spiritual path, which is all of this sort of more alternative esoteric stuff I was into, and the sort of traditional clinical route that I went down. So my views around mental health and um, clinical systems is quite different from a lot of my colleagues as well. But around 2016, like a lot of people, I got to this, do I want to always do this? And I'd had burnout twice, and I had a serious car accident in 2019 that I thought had literally finished me off, where I ended up with PTSD. I had massive just in pain all the time. And it took me about 2 years to recover from that pain. So I decided early on, late 2022, a new and sometimes this is the way it is for some people. Sometimes we have to get still enough to be able to say, what is it? There's a nudge going on there. There's something moving me in a different direction. So I started paying attention to that. And I also trained as a yoga and meditation teacher. So I've got all these
I
different
love
things.
yoga. I think yoga is one of the best things for you mentally and physically.
It is massively important. But also, as I've gone back to, now that I'm in my 50s, is gone back to going to the gym because, weight training and compound exercise is also vitally important as we age. And I was seeing that podcast you were doing with Dr. Rothschild, I think it was,
Oh
where
yeah,
he was,
Carl.
yeah, and he was
Shout out
talking
to
about,
Carl.
pardon?
Shout out to Dr. Carl Rothschild, the red light therapy genius. By the way, I do have to give a little bit of a shout out to my buddy Bruce. He makes some of the best, I don't know, like high protein snacks. Like this was their barbecue chips.
Looks like tortillas.
Oh my God, low in salt, sodium, high in protein. All of his products are low in sugar. I have to watch my sugar. They're literally the best tasting. Sometimes when you take sugar out of stuff, it doesn't taste so good. Somehow they figured it out.
No, I have that problem with smart ketchup, which is one of my Achilles heels, which
What
I
is it?
do.
Smart ketchup?
Tomato ketchup.
I'm sorry, what is that?
It's I don't know if you've got it in the US actually. It's like a condiment that goes with dinner, like a sauce that you dip, like mayonnaise, but you dip, but it's a tomato-based product.
Yeah, it's ketchup. We got ketchup.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
I actually have to go out of my way to buy ketchup without sugar added to it. So I don't know if you know this, but they add 30% cane sugar to regular ketchup these days.
so they've got the product where they've got no sugar in it or reduced sugar,
Yeah,
which
exactly. It's called Simply Ketchup. But then the regular ketchup that's on the shelf that everyone's grabbing, it's got 30% sugar in it. And the funny thing is, Heinz realized early on that if they added sugar to ketchup, which was never part of the recipe, they could get an addiction. People would be addicted to their ketchup because of the sugar.
well, that's what we're realizing about the whole food industry, though, aren't we? Is that sugar is one of the biggest addictive factors in
Sugar is
people.
5 times more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah. And I was just watching, what was it? I was watching something yesterday where cocaine was in Coca-Cola, wasn't it? That's why it was called
For a while
Coke.
there, yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but yeah, that is a true story. They had cocaine inside of Coca-Cola. The executives at Coca-Cola must be like, "We're going to be rich."
It was endorsed by doctors, I think, where it made made all the middle class women
Well,
all.
I will say one thing. I'm just trying to figure out how they got the cocaine into the factory. Like, we got to add this to the Coca-Cola, but do not get it on your fingertips. Their workers must have been like, "Oh my God, I love working here." Shout out to all the workers at Coca-Cola that were sniffing the cocaine before it went into the batch.
Yeah, I don't know when that changed actually. It was around for a while, wasn't it?
What?
The Coca-Cola with the cocaine in it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they got away with it as long as they could. As long as they could keep buying off politicians, they were like, "Listen, just don't say anything about it."
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's so much about our food anyway, in terms of nutrition that has some kind of effect on us that that's part of, part of the yoga and meditation and mindfulness that I enjoy and what I use to teach people. So you were asking me earlier kind of what am I doing now and where's this going is a lot of the work I've done is regardless of whether or not it's through one-to-one work, coaching groups that I've ran. And actually my next 2 or 3 months is going to be more traveling because I'm doing sort of travel videos and tapping into that other passions that I've got is around just helping people find that place in their life of what lights them up. So if they're feeling stuck or struggling with anxiety, depression, or just disillusioned and meaninglessness, and there's so much fear and anxiety that's going on in the world, that you've got to teach people how to use their minds properly so that they don't get caught in all of
Get your
this. Not
mind right, get your life right, get your money right, get your body right. I tell people that all the time. You just got to get your mind right. Once you get your mind right, you can get your life right, you can get your body right, you can get your money right, you can get everything right, but it all starts with getting your mind right.
It's a huge factor. And actually, I created a video a few months ago because the thing that fascinated me was um, even though I'd been in the field for a long time, in one of my previous jobs, I could have one thing that happened. I'd get an email, someone would say something, and it would stick. It would be like sticking like glue in my mind.
You just couldn't get
And
rid of it. You're like, God, that's driving me cuckoo. I'm so mad.
yeah, and even if you realize that what's going on and you can notice the feelings that it generates, there were certain time periods where I really struggled to figure out with all the tools that I had in my toolbox, all the training I had, what was going on. So I practiced a few things, and I actually used to teach clinicians this, and I was teaching them about what I was learning from yoga, which was or mantras. So if you use mantras, and I used to do one called the Mula mantra, which is part of a yogic sort of philosophy, that I decided I was going to do it for 30 days. And that's my thing about doing things for 30 days. So you start to embed the new things in your habits that aren't habits yet, that become a habit, so that you can start to sort of generate the way that you want to feel and change the life in the way that you want to change it. But I was really struggling with this, so I thought I'd test it out. So I decided to do this Mula mantra for 30 days. Before I went to work every day, it took me about 25 minutes to go through these three sets of information, and I do it 108 times each mantra. And it was really fascinating because I noticed as I was walking out the door that rather than the other thoughts that would come back in after like 1 or 2 minutes, is the mantra was still going around. I get in the car, drive down the motorway, the mantra's still going around. And it was really fascinating because we teach in our health systems, in the classic mental health systems, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and they're often looking at the thoughts. But some reason, some people are more inclined to have these thoughts that are so sticky like glue that they can't extricate themselves from it. And what I'm trying to show people is I have those experiences at times. And it's like sometimes you've got to find a way through it because otherwise, what you do, and I think I used to listen a lot to Abraham Hicks, law of attraction kind of stuff. And they were talking about how you only have about 15 seconds into your head before that thought starts taking over and another thought comes and another thought comes, and it's always matching the energy or the frequency of that thought, so that if you have one depressive thought and you struggle with depression or anxiety or negative thinking, everyone does to some degree, but for people who where it doesn't take them over, normally have practiced something for a while, that it doesn't end up sticking to the same degree, and they can switch a bit like in NLP. You can then switch your state, you can switch your mental thinking, but you have to learn how to do that, and you have to believe it's possible. And if you can't do it, then you have to ask, well, what am I getting out of this? Why am I choosing to allow this to happen? So I did that for that 30 days. And so the whole idea of 30 days to change your life, change, grow, and transform, and not with the idea that you have to become a better person, because actually you might be a great person already. But if you're stuck, anxious, or depressed, then something in your life is saying you need to take a look at something. You need to do something different. And what is that different thing that you need to do? So all I've done over my whole 25 sort of year career is pull out these different models from spirituality, from psychology, NLP, from law of attraction, all these different things because everyone's different. But we all have minds, we all have a past, and we all
Not all
have,
of us has minds. Some people don't have a mind anymore. They've lost their mind.
well, yeah, well, use that phrase if you're talking about people sort of, you know, say they'd enter the mental health system. And often that relates to when someone's gone into crisis mode. You know, you can be okay, or you can be a little bit stressed. But and I often teach clients a bit like the red, amber, the green, amber, red system. Green is you're doing okay, things are going fairly okay. Amber is where you're getting some warning signs, you're not sleeping, you're not thinking
I
as
think
well.
I think sleep, I think lack of sleep is one of the greatest challenges that people have these days. I don't think a lot of people are getting a good night's sleep or even good rest once a day.
And it is vital. And yeah, and it's often overlooked, or seen as a separate thing. But actually, and the older you get, like when you're younger, you can go out and you can go clubbing and you can get home at 4 in the morning and like I used to do and get up at 5 o'clock shift. And I could do that for years, but now one night of not having a good sleep massively impacts productivity, whatever it is I want to work on.
Yeah, it's
And
funny because I just traveled for the last 6 days up until about 2 days ago. I went from Vegas to Atlanta to Miami to Dallas to Fort Worth, back to Dallas, back to Vegas. And, even though I had nice hotel room, nice bed, blah, 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 one thing that traveling like that kind of messes you up about getting just like a good sleep. Like I would sleep, I'm not kidding, I would sleep when I was on the road for like 2 hours and then I'd get up and then I'd sleep for another 2 hours and then I'd get up. And when I came home, one of the things that I absolutely craved was just sleeping in my own bed. And I'm not kidding you, for like, I want to say 8 to 12 hours, I just slept in bed. And that helped me like recharge my life. I was less frustrated, I was less short with my staff and my team. And I realized that I needed that sleep to get my mind right.
it's vital. And as you say, if you're moving about from one place to the next,
Oh,
doing
those time zones were crazy because I'm on Pacific in Vegas. So when I went to Atlanta, that's East Coast. Then I went down to Miami, which is still East Coast. Then to Dallas, which is Central. Stayed in Central, then went back to the West Coast. The whole like crossing the United States back and forth, that gets old after a while.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'll have to send you the link because there's Diary of a CEO, Stephen, I can't remember his surname. He did a whole podcast on what he does because he travels all around the world as well, and how he monitors things so that he gets the optimum amount of rest, nutrition, water, and so that he arrives in every place as fresh as possible. Because, as you
I
know,
think water is mission critical. This is 32 ounces of water, and I drink probably 8 of these a day. And I tell people all the time, like I have a casino host. I'm going to a casino to speak at an event on the 9th of September. And they ask me, they're like, hey, what do you like to drink? We'll have it in your room. And I'm like, water. They're like, okay, but what else? It's Coke or wine. And I said, sober 16 years. I love good water. So as the host over at this resort, they're actually getting me some of this like imported water from Japan. I think he took the thing a little too far. I was like, I'm good with just bottled water. But it's funny because when I started telling them about I just like good, clean, filtered water, people like look at me and they're like, but yeah, but what do you like to really drink? And I'm like, I absolutely love good, clean, filtered water. And I think people forget how good that is for your body. And granted, every now and then, like if I have pizza, I gotta have Diet Pepsi, Diet something. Like I don't know what it is, but pizza and soda, it's just like it's gotta go that way. But that's about it. Like other than that, I'm pretty much water all the time, except for coffee. I do like a good coffee every now and then. Good dark coffee, no sugar, no macchiato and no whipped cream and all this stuff. My buddy goes to Starbucks the other day with me and he orders some contraption that's about this big. And I just go online just real quick to see how much sugar is in that thing. And he had a caramel frappuccino with fucking extra whipped cream, double pump, triple pump. And I'm like, I looked into the pumps and I'm like, dude, that's 128 grams of sugar in there. He's like, yeah, but I only have one a day. I'm like, buddy, that's like 12 days, 13 days worth of sugar for me. I'm like, that is just like, you're literally putting so much sugar in your body that your body's got to produce so much insulin just to burn that sugar off. He's like, yeah, but it's just one a day. I'm like, you shouldn't even have one of those a month, a year.
It's funny how people just really question, isn't it? A very basic thing that we all need is water, but actually, we've so normalized all of these carbonated drinks out there that are so bad for us in many different ways, and normalized always having some kind of alcohol as well. And trying to navigate that, especially because you said you've been sober 16 years. So trying to navigate those different groups and that kind of thinking have always been a little bit different in that way, where people just assume that you're always going to want that, is really hard for people. It's because all of these things are always there on offer right in front of you, aren't they? You
Well,
know,
I've come to the reality. If you walk through an airport, you will pass by 90% of the places you should never eat at. Like they got Starbucks and deep fried food here and burgers here that probably aren't even real meat and real bread, and then pizza here, and then something wrapped in dough here. And then, like, I walked through an airport and I'm like, and the only thing that I love about the airport is you can take a metal container and go get water now and just, get clean, hopefully clean filtered water. Atlanta, your water fountains are not filtered. You should literally spend a little extra money. But at the end of the day, I've come to the reality the food you get offered at the airport is literally toxic for you. It's the worst. And here's the crazy thing. People eat sugar-based products when they get right before they get on a plane. That's the craziest thing in the world because you're going to be sedentary for 5 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever. That's the worst time to be putting sugar in your body. Drink water. And if you got a protein bar, take that. But, grab a banana if you can find a banana. And by the way, Dallas, Jesus Christ, $3 for one banana? Come on, man. What's wrong with you people?
whole different topic on cost of living, isn't it?
No
Uh,
shit. Anyway, so let me ask you a question. A lot of people have fear. They have a lot of fear that's holding them back in life from living their best life. How do you get over fear?
um, I think that's is a good question because I have been a natural warrior for the whole of my life.
I love that.
I
I
was a
actually love that term, natural warrior. I love that. That's awesome. That's a great way to define yourself.
and I was a very shy kid and everything. And I was actually talking, I've got a granddaughter now, and we were at um a climbing thing yesterday where all the kids put a harness on, a climbing wall center, and she hasn't done it before. And part of me, and I said to her dad, my son, I'm not sure if I can go because I might get so anxious. I don't want her to pick up on my anxiety. Anyway, so I went and we were watching her do it, and it was fascinating because she's only 4 and she's got this harness on, and these climbing walls are huge. And slowly, slowly, I was watching how her dad was encouraging her, pushing her a little bit each time, and letting her come down when she was ready, and pushing her up a bit more, and letting her come down when she was ready. And it's that balance between safety versus risk. And it's a psychological theory of we can stay in our safety zone, and often our safety zones are created in our mind through our upbringing. So my mum's way of creating the world and her idea of the world certainly had an influence on me, as well as my own genetics of anxiety and fear and being a shy kid. And so, even though in some senses I've done some things that a lot of my friends would never have done, like I left home at 18, I've traveled all around the UK, I worked for loads, I used to work in hotels in the hotel industry, and would do those things without even thinking about it. And then there could be other things. And it got worse when later on in my career. So I think it was a combination. I've seen this happen to people as they get older. It's almost like whether those fears are still embedded from childhood and they just pop up again, or whether or not, like what you said, if you're tired and you've been flying around everywhere and you're not eating properly, I think there's a combination. We found this, a lot of psychiatrists are realizing that we need to also be looking at people's nutrition, what they drink, what they do, how they move, all of those different factors of our life, because we can have a vulnerability to anxiety or certain things. And so going back to your point about mindset is sometimes you have to keep rewiring. You said you'd done a lot of work with Tony Robbins and NLP. You have to keep rewiring the brain. If the brain's neural pathways are also connected to whatever the forces are that was created in the family about don't go there, it's not safe, don't do this, and you've embedded that as part of your psyche, then you need and like I was watching my son, and it was beautiful to watch. You need that person around you when you're growing up that doesn't let you shrink and avoid, but at the same time won't throw you off a cliff screaming and traumatize you. And I know you're involved in a lot of sport, and I think this is a lot that comes from sports psychology, that we have to have a look at what's our safety zone. And then some people can go right outside of it, do a bungee jump off a cliff, and just be really like out there and do that. There are some personalities who do that. And then these others, I think it was the way my mom created the world of how it's safe here, but we have to be mindful about where we expand that. So I learned over the years for my own temperament and personality is that sometimes I had a tendency to push myself too forward into situations sometimes before I was ready, before I was prepared. And ready and prepared is sometimes your knowledge, your skill, your sense of self, your confidence. Have you done it before? And like what I teach clients now, when they are struggling with something, is where have you done this before? Because we've got the resources somewhere in our experience that we can tap into that says, well, I have traveled on my own before, or I did organize this thing, or whatever the thing is. So I just sometimes you have to get to a place rather than trying to pretend that you're not shy sometimes and that you do struggle sometimes, rather than, and sometimes that's what can create more stress, is you just come to this realization that, okay, this is who you are right now, and how you sort of manifest in the world. And what is it that you want to do moving forward, and what's getting in the way of that? And then who can help you move through those things? So you need the right people around you. I think sometimes you need a community of different people who have different skills. So I had a client recently, maybe 6 months ago, and he was going through a relationship breakup, and I was coaching him through that, and it was a very toxic relationship. So a lot of the work I've done is actually on darker, deep psychology around toxic, narcissistic, psychopathological sort of relationships. And this was definitely veering over into that dark realm. Anyway, so I was coaching him as he came to some realizations, because I don't have a goal to get people in or out of relationships, but I help them move forward if when they're ready. And so as he was coming out of that, he started noticing different friends around him that some were getting frustrated with him as he was telling his story. And other people he was going to was telling his story, they were really present and heard him and validated him. So I said to him, rather than seeing that they're not performing in the way that you expect them to perform, what gifts and strengths and skills have they got that they give you right now? And so he needed the guy that gave him the kick up the arse friend that said, come on, mate, just come on, just go to that competition, just do that thing. And he also needed the friends that he could go to that was like a support group that he could go and offload to sometimes. I said, don't try and make your kick in the arse friend the guy who's going to listen to you and be your therapist. I'm your therapist. We can talk about those things here, but you can also get those other needs met from those other aspects in your community. Not one person can meet all of those different needs, same as partners can't, and different friends. And so sometimes we get frustrated and irritated because, you know, we're looking at those people around us and oh, they're like this and this is happening, that's happening. So it's about being realistic of where I'm at right now, what's going on, and where am I trying to get to? And when you're coming out of a relationship, as in NLP terms, you're moving out, you're moving away from what you don't want. You don't quite know what you're moving towards. And sometimes when we don't know, and this is why people stay in really crappy relationships, is because they're so scared of the unknown and the fear is too big for them, it's too daunting. Is if they haven't got enough support around them while they take each of those steps and remain safe, they'll stay in that relationship regardless of how crap it is and how moralizing and how much it affects your mental health and how much you're now not sleeping and you've lost all your friends because it's safe and it's known, and that's where you're getting some level of your needs met.
That's
Look,
awesome. That's awesome. And you've touched on a lot of things where people need to bring people into their life and into their what I call circle. But you got to be very careful too and put the right people there, people that are going to lift you up, not people that are going to bring you down and make your life more exhausting.
and that's the tricky element. You've hit on a really good thing there because I guess where I saw that um express itself the most, one of my last jobs when I worked for a private company, I'd help them win a bid to create a wellbeing program for domestic abuse. And in domestic abuse, we see more now the sort of narcissistic psychopathological traits actually exist in many, not all of those relationships.
By the way,
Some
I've
of
got
it,
a question I've been dying to ask the right person. I think you're it. I'm in Las Vegas and I see a lot of beautiful women that, for whatever reason, historically find themselves involved in horrible abusive relationships. Why do what? And the question I always ask is, why do women stay there? Like it just doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't make sense, but there's several ways of looking at this. Is that program that we created? Um, I I I hired staff, clinical staff, and one of the things we did is like a mental health assessment. We always look at risk and resilience. I brought this way of assessing people into all the services that I managed. So we look at what are the risk factors, and the risk factors in anyone's mental health, regardless of where you are right now. If we look at mental health as a continuum, here is crises slipping over into serious mental health, and here is okay. So mental health is on a continuum. So if we look at risk factors, things that move you up that continuum towards being more likely or predisposed to potentially, and I'm being really mindful of my words, developing or having a mental health issue is because of a lot of the risk factors. And I'll say why, because I used to work a lot with the researchers and the data that was coming through mental health. And one of the things that we found out over a decade ago, and government's known this stuff for years, um, that many of the people that got to adult years that had a mental health issue had actually started to show some signs of that around 14, 15. If I look back at my experience of working in schools and all the kids that I worked with, many of those kids were living in families where there was drug abuse, alcohol problems, domestic violence, or the parent was just seriously had some distorted view of reality. And a proportion of the women that came through that wellbeing service that I set up in 2020 to 22, when we tracked back, and a lot of people don't do that, they don't realize that when we track back, high proportion of them had been in families where there was high conflict, low conflict management skills, or outright abuse. Sometimes it's just too. I had a friend who used to say, "Oh, me and my mum and dad used to fight all the time. We used to smack each other about, because it was like normal reality in a lot of families." And so they either grown up with that, but we also see, and this is what does worry me about what's happening in modern society, is that um, those women and boys, but we do have sort of gender differences in this as well, that they get to that sort of 15 years, 14, 15 years old, and we saw this pattern coming out. They're vulnerable and they want validation. They want to feel loved and they want to feel looked after. Um, but they potentially attracting, consciously or not, boyfriends who may just capitalize on those vulnerabilities. Or they've had partners that are 8, 10 years older and there's a level of, in some cases, a level of even grooming that goes on. And what we know from psychology research, um, and and this is where I'm not going to be as accurate, but it doesn't take very long. So if you imagine two people meet on a dating website, or they meet in the local park and they start chatting, and they say, "Hey, can I have your number?" and have your number, and you start texting each other. That's where the dopamine hits start coming out. Dopamine, 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 text messages. Okay. And women, I've seen this happen so much because I'm coaching women through this at the moment, where, oh, he really likes me. He's texts me all the time. Oh, he
The
wants to be in
texting
contact.
all of a sudden is a validation. He loves me. A text now equals love.
Yeah. And so the warped ideas about relationships are tremendous, which haven't helped at all by the nonsense that's portrayed in the movies. So that early stage of dating, if you've got a guy that either can't manage his anger, he's got some issues, he's had some mother wound issues, she's had some father wound issues, and I'm looking through the spiritual lens when I say that like that. Um, get together, or he's a little bit jealous and he's insecure. Jealousy and insecurity, not great components. And he starts, where you going, what you doing, and what happens early on is a lot of women miss the red flags. There's so much on podcasts now about women who are realizing some of these things that they've known in the CIA for a long time about these behaviors. But if you meet a partner who is fits the narcissistic sort of criteria, and I've got to be careful using that because we're using that word a lot now, but has
What
those
word? What word?
narcissist.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of weird. Like everyone uses that word these days. If you break up with somebody, I see girls all the time. He was a narcissist, and I'm thinking to myself, was he really? Like, are you using that word a lot, or you just does it feel like a good thing to use?
Yeah, it's tricky because this is a problem with.
Narcissist and misogynist. Those are like two that like are thrown around so often. And I'm like, maybe he wasn't, maybe she wasn't, whatever.
Well, you can't. One thing we do in clinical circles, you can never make an assessment based on one little aspect of information. You just can't do it
Well, in social media and in life, people tend to do that. They make, oh, he was a narcissist this one time, so for sure he's a narcissist.
because you can't. And actually, there's a lady who writes on Quora called Eleanor Greenberg, and
What's her name?
she, Eleanor Greenberg,
Okay.
and I think she's in her 60s, 70s now. She is like the top dog on this whole psychopathological spectrum, and has worked with I can't remember the terms, borderline personality disorder, narcissism, psychopathology, and just as
All the
Robert,
good ones.
all of those, yeah, but that's been her
Basically,
claim.
she's worked with all the politicians.
Uh, yeah, no comment. But
Well, you're in the UK, so you really can't comment anymore these days. They've got your tongue tied.
well, that's a whole, yeah. Well, they've had access to hypnotherapy and NLP a long time in their language pattern, so and they use it to their advantage a lot. But Eleanor Greenberg, so she looks at that, and what she basically says, because on Quora there are multiple spaces where people are saying, "Is he an narcissist? This happened, that happened," and you've got to be really careful using any clinical terms. And why I'm highlighting her and my work of, you know, I've assessed and worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people. Did many narcissists or psychopaths come into our spaces? No. But I met a lot of women who were in relationships that the more and more the information unfolded, the more we would say, hmm. And all you do is you sort of start adding up all of these different bits of information. And to diagnose anything, you have to have a cluster of symptoms. And Eleanor Greenberg says you can't, she even struggles to decide who would fit that criteria and who wouldn't. And she's been in the field for 20, 30 years. She's an expert in it. So, but it's useful language. It's useful. So when we're chatting to clients,
Popular language. It's become a popular term to toss around flimsily.
yeah, and that always happens. I mean, our language anyway is, if you really checked out what we said 90% of the time, what it means, really, a lot of people wouldn't really necessarily be able to understand what it is they're saying and why they're saying it. And that's why we need to check that out and have people who do think differently around us. But the what can happen is if somebody has those traits, basically somebody's only out to get what they want, get their needs met, but then that's a distorted relationship because relationships are meant to be about the two people that come together as a team and work together to build something, a life, children, a business, or something like that. And somebody is only out to make sure that somebody serves their needs, but also at the same time treats that person. And there's a guy called Sam Vatkin who
What's his name?
Sam Vatkin,
I thought you said
V-A-T-K-I,
Vatican. I'm like, what a great last name. Sam the Vatican. Hmm.
the Vatican, no, Vatkin. And he talks a lot about the deeper aspects. If you're clinically minded and like the psychology on it, he talks a lot about those aspects of what is actually going on for the narcissist. But we get people on a spectrum, neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression. They're all on spectrums. We don't fit a neat profile. Humans aren't like that. But in those relationships, you've got a vulnerable, sensitive woman who ends up looking after everybody else, putting their needs first, hasn't learned how to say no, come from a
Saying
different.
no is an important skill set. People should learn how to say no because when you say no, you keep your life a lot simpler. A lot of times people say yes too quickly and they don't realize yes is a harder word to say than no. But no is an easier way to keep your life organized.
Yeah, but you've got to know what your yeses and nos feel like. Yeah, because
Well,
a
yes, yes is like, oh, yes, you feel great. Oh, yes, you feel great. No, you're like, oh man, I'm such a prick. It's like people feel bad to say no, but no is not always a bad thing.
but sometimes you can have a range of opportunities and options that come in front, whether that's dating, business, or whatever. And I think we started touching on this when we talked about the podcast I'd done on the human design, um, where it's not always easy to figure out whether you want it to be a no or a yes. And in dating, I've seen women do it a lot where they're just not sure. And I'm like, not sure often means no, you know. So you've got to be able to, so I'm teaching people how you tune in to that feeling of what has been a yes in the past and now does that feel in your body? Like what you said, it's like, yeah, hell yes, your body opens up. You feel like you move forward towards it, you feel magnetized towards it. When it's a no, or I'm not sure this is good for me, your body can actually close down, it can shrink to that mode, a bit like you're trying to avoid the attacker on the field, that you don't want that in your space. So you now build a protective bubble. So it's almost like the subconscious and the soul, but we haven't learned, going back to school, and we haven't learned how to tune into ourselves and figure that out because we've been taught to people please, to not upset anyone, to all of that
Yep.
kind of stuff. And the more vulnerable you are to having those traits and I've had a few clients that it didn't even occur to them that they shouldn't even think about what they wanted. It was always about, let me work out where I am and where the group are at, then I will mirror and behave according to wherever the group is going. Was like, well, did you want to go and see that band? Did you want to go shopping? Or were you really tired and you needed to go to bed for the day? How do you start to recognize what you need, what you want? And that's where it can get really tricky in relationships. And because there's a payoff, there's a cost, like in business, there's always that balance. But
Always.
in narcissistic, unhealthy relationships, it's not obvious. And going back to your point of and actually there is a broad range of men out there that are in relationships with women um who are dangerous to be around and be with. And
That's actually a good way to put it because there's a lot of women that are dangerous for men,
yeah, yeah,
especially professional athletes. I've seen it being around professional athletes for the last 20 years,
mhm,
and professional athletes are very targeted by some women that are very dangerous for them to bring in their life.
mhm.
Like they literally do their research. It's almost like a military operation when they decide to date them.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that mindset of find yourself a nice husband that can provide for you, has been around since the early, the early 1900s. It was the way women were taught, but some women have learned to capitalize on that.
Well, yeah, not only that, some women have actually learned how to turn that into a business venture, like finding the right husband in many cases can be a business venture.
I think it's probably a high proportion. I'm a woman.
I'm right here in Vegas. I can tell you it's a very high proportion out here. You almost have to be very careful on which woman you take to dinner.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? If you're high profile, if you're a star, a singer, if you've got any status online and it looks like
Well,
that
I
you're,
mean, if you're a bald man, I mean, we are in such high demand out here in Vegas. Hey, Melanie, I got to ask you, give me something, anything that you can talk right into the camera and tell people something that will inspire them to overcome their fears in life. In fact, give them something that'll inspire them to use the word no more often.
so over over time, the cost to yourself for not saying no when you need to say no can be the matter of life and death. And you don't want to wait.
Wow, that's good. If that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. Don't say no, and it could be the difference between life and death.
Because if you keep compromising yourself, okay, and you're heading towards talking about the mental health continuum, if you're in a stressful job and you've got a stressful relationship or it's toxic and you've got the kids and you've got debt worries and all of these things, and men often carry the burden of this huge innate way of wanting to protect, and there's a lot of men that don't, but can carry that burden, and you give, and you give. We know that if this bottle represents your energy every day, and when you're at burnout, you're not even there. When I was at burnout, I could barely function. I'd sleep for hours and maybe do the basics. You don't want to get to the point where your body is drawing on every ounce of energy. Just keep your heart, your liver, and everything else going. And the later we get in our 40s and 50s, those things that we've compromised spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically in our 20s, 30s, and 50s will start to show up. They'll start to show up as disease, as mental health issues, as problem relationships. And you don't want to wait for the wake-up call. And in tarot, for example, there's a tarot card called the Tower. And sometimes you don't make the decision to start pursuing what is right for you as to why on earth you were born, and who knows why you're here, because everyone has a purpose, everyone has a gift to share with the world. So if you have ignored that and given away and said yes and compromised yourself, you don't want to wait for the universe to decide when to let go of that pack of cards and everything tumble around you. You want to start noticing the signs before the signs get so blatantly in your face. And that's what I used to see in my services. People used to come when they were in crises. They'd ignore the sign, and come in crises. They're tipping over into psychosis, or their relationships are falling apart. They're drinking copious amounts of alcohol because they can't cope with just having to wake up to a job they hate or a relationship that is tearing them down. So, in that sense, if that's one thing I'm passionate about, don't wait. Follow that little sign that says, what's going on? There's something not right. I don't know what it is. I need to spend some time on myself trying to, okay, and maybe I'll talk to a few different people. And I'm not saying I don't advocate therapy and coaching for everyone. Okay, because you can have a really good group of friends and support mechanisms around you that can do that. But if you're on your own, a lot of people are isolated. If you're on your own and you haven't got that support system, then this is where people get to the point where they can't see a way out, and start considering options like suicide. And I've seen those numbers, and I've seen those pathways. So I don't want to wait for people to get to that point. And thankfully, even though we popularize a lot of language, at least we're making mental health, as we all have mental health, we all have physical health, we all, it's not just them and us, but it's about knowing yourself well enough. And if you don't, like going back to why I was looking at the gene keys, human design, astrology, numerology, psychology, personal development, you don't have to believe in any one theory, but all of these can give you a bit of an idea. The gene keys and the human design are like a map. And the idea is that we're born with a map to some degree, but it's not complete. And part of our life journey is to complete some of these things, to find our path, to bring something to the world, to
So
bring our
what's your message to the world? What's your message to people?
oh God, my message. What was the second thing you asked me? You said about not saying no, didn't you? And then you said fear. Um,
I
it
think
sounds
fear is the biggest thing that people have a challenge with.
yeah, fear's innate. Ever since we were caveman and cave women, fear is a part of us. So most of what we're scared of doesn't come into fruition, but what we do now know and understand about neural pathways and what lights up in your brain is if you entertain these ideas all the time, you can, we can go as far as saying you can actually create the reality of all the things you're scared about and all the things happen that you think are going to happen. You're waiting for the shoe to drop. You think this is going to go wrong, that's going to go wrong. And actually, what is the worst that will happen if you didn't try those things? Because and this is one common thread for a lot of older people is you don't want regrets. You don't want to look back at the thing you didn't do or the conversation you didn't have or the parent you didn't visit or the last conversation with a sick relative. You want to go and face those things. And if those things are uncomfortable and tough, and this is one of the things that I think psychology and therapy hasn't helped with, we we aren't taught to feel the discomfort. It's like I felt like this and now I just want to feel peace and comfort. But actually, things come up that are uncomfortable, that are part of us. Okay, we need to go and deal with that. We need to go and have that tough conversation. We need to go and if you don't know how to, learn how to, read a book, go to a seminar, go to a conference, find out what the thing is. But if it's fear about nothing, if you can't actually pin it, then it's your mind playing tricks on you. It's a fear about something, about not being able to make it, never fulfilling your dreams and destiny, then, and you probably see this all the time, Chris, is you need to start hanging out with people who are doing this stuff all the time, you know? So my fears come up. I've been paralyzed with fear a few times, and it's odd. It wasn't a mental thing. It wasn't like a thought that popped in my head, but I had to just, and sometimes the very simple thing is I just had to breathe through it. Same as when I teach clients about grief. If you lose someone, grief is one of the horriblest things, I think.
Yeah,
So
that is tough.
it's tough. It's horrible. When those waves of grief come in, if we've not learned to ever grieve as a kid, and most Western people haven't, is that grief is overwhelming and it consumes everything for months. But it will start to shift, but you don't know when. And when that grief comes up, I say to people, it's like a wave when you're surfing. You have to breathe that wave in, breathe it through your body. Don't be scared of it and let it pass. We have to give the body a message that we can cope, we're okay, we can do it, we'll move through it, even if it's a day or half a day. And then you treat yourself nicely, and then you get up again and you go and do your thing. So it's a balance.
Well, Melanie, I'm going to have grief in a little bit because I ran out of water. I've enjoyed talking to you, and we should chop it up again sometime soon. I think your message has been spot on. Whoever watches this podcast is going to get so much value from just this conversation.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
And
Send me all your links where people can find you, and we'll put the links below so that people can find you.
cool. All right, great. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
She's Melanie Gabbi. What time is it over there in the UK?
What is it now? It's 8:30, and we're just edging into darker nights. So that's
I
why.
was gonna say it went from little light to dark now. I'm like, man, that's got to be getting late over there.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago it was bright and sunny and late in the evening. It was really lovely. So yeah, I'll send the links because I've got a web page. I've got a YouTube page with my podcast and my 30-day programs. There's loads of free stuff on there because it's just a chance for me to download what I like sharing. Um, and there's a lot of things that people can do. Sometimes I kind of encourage people to just go for like a Kickstarter series. So I often say to people, just sign up for free sessions. Come with where are you at? What's going on? Let's have a look at that. Where do you want to go? Okay, and what steps have you tried and how can we help get you there? And that can be enough for a lot of people. And other people want someone who's their wing person while they're moving through some of that tough stuff because and I know we're finishing in a second, is those athletes, those singers, all those people you come into contact with, The hardest thing when you're hiring, whether you're CEO of a business or whatever, is that you've got to not just be responsible for that whole company business, its outcomes, finances, everything. You've got to still manage life at home. And
But
often people are struggling to manage that. And it's hard to admit it. You can't talk to your colleagues. You've got a persona to maintain. And that can be what's really difficult for people who are sort of at that level of business or at that level of functioning. So, um, yeah, so hopefully some of this helps.
oh yeah, I think it's going to help a lot of people. I think we touched on a lot of super things there. While we may have not touched on like 50 items, I think there's three good nuggets right inside this conversation that are going to help people grow.
Brilliant. That's what I like to hear.
Oh, it's super important. I think, like I said, I think there's some things in there that for the right person, they may just take one thing, and sometimes that's all you need is just one thing to literally help you down your path and live a better, high quality life.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Melanie, let's chop it up again soon. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right, stick around 1 second.